How does it feel in your house and out on the street?
It feels like a mix of COVID war in a sense. Like we're really stuck at home. We are here, my husband and I, with our three children. Since Saturday, we woke up at 8:15 in the morning to sirens. And on Saturday, I think we spent between 7 to 8 hours in our bomb shelter. We live in our own home and we have a fortified concrete shelter in our basement, which is a really amazing thing. It's partly underground, so it's kind of as safe as possible. And not everyone in Israel has access to that kind of shelter as easily as we do. So we feel really grateful. But for the last 5 days, we have had alerts and sirens all throughout the day and night. And there's a lot of anxiety and tension. The noise of the alert itself is the scariest piece in a sense because it lets you know that something is coming and it just kind of continues throughout the day. And so you're always feeling a little bit on edge.
Yeah. How are your kids doing?
Um, they are as good as they can be. They are stir crazy and they're bored. And my youngest is frightened of that noise mainly. I think that that's the scariest piece for him. He doesn't want to go outside of our home because he's afraid to be caught outside during a siren. We went to the supermarket a few days ago just to get a couple of basic things. And right as we got there, the alert sounded that there would be a siren. And that's a really scary feeling. Even though you know there's shelters around, you want to be as safe as possible and as close to home as possible.
Mm. Um, Now I want to hear very much about your loved ones who were held, kidnapped by Hamas and how they're doing. I mean, hopefully they're handling this okay. I'm sure it's a lot of trauma to feel again.
Yeah, I think we see it both for my family and for all the return hostages, and also for those that were at Nova, that any major noise is really triggering. And so I think that's the hardest part. We just celebrated Purim here, and similar to Fourth of July, there can be a lot of fireworks that are used, like small fireworks. And there was a big campaign in Israel to not use them because the noise is so triggering, especially for people that had been at Nova. Um, Unfortunately, in the last 2.5 years, these sirens and these wars have become really normal. And so I don't think it feels out of the ordinary, but I absolutely think it feels a little bit more triggering as it continues in a sense.
What do you think, as you're dealing with the physical trauma of the sirens and turning to your safe room and protecting your kids, what do you feel about the objective of this conflict?
It's a really good question. I think it sits kind of at the core of my two identities, right? I'm an Israeli and I'm American. Living here for the past 2.5 years, we have been attacked by Hamas and Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Iraq, Iran, and more. And all of these have been funded by this regime in Iran. And so, as someone who lives in Israel, where they chant daily death to Israel, and while they do awfully inhumane things to their own people, I feel hopeful that this is going to inspire some sort of regime change that will bring something better for the Iranians and also for the region. And as an American, I understand that there's a lot of complexity in understanding why this should be a war that America enters into. I think there's a lot of geopolitics at play that can be hard for someone sitting in Boston to understand without having lived through what we are in Israel for the last 2.5 years.
Does that ultimate objective of potentially fully eliminating the terror threat that has hung over Israel decades now, does that make sheltering a little bit easier?
Yeah, I think that people feel like maybe this is the last time we have to do this in this way, right? Maybe this is the last time that this regime will be in power and will continue to fund these proxies in all of the neighboring countries that have been attacking us, not only in the last 2.5 years, but for the last number of decades. And it's not just for Israel, it's also for the Iranians. I think there's a lot of love between the people of Israel and the people of Iran, and that they just want for one another a safe and democratic and fair and humane regime in both countries that act as responsible actors in the region. And so I do think we as adults see the bigger picture, but it's extremely hard for the kids to know that their school was canceled this week, that they didn't get to dress up for this, this big holiday of Purim, that they didn't get to meet their friends and celebrate. And, we went through that as a, a world through COVID, and our children in this country and other parts of the region have certainly experienced that in the last 2.5 years of war.
Can you talk to your two loved ones who were by Hamas? Do you think about them right now?
Yeah, of course. Um, I think every time that there is some sort of increase in the war, it must bring up all of those things for them and just know we're all, it's like we're all living the trauma on the outside. And so whenever something like this happens, it just kind of brings everyone right back. The sound of that siren, it brings everyone right back. But I think the strength of the Israeli people is to hold one another in community. And I see that happening both for my family members and in my own circles and neighborhoods. And people come together in the worst times here. We continue to hope that this is the end of those times.
Mm. I think if I have anything else to ask you, forgive me, where in Massachusetts are you from?
We moved here from Brookline 11 years ago.
Oh, very nice. Um, um, is there any other perspective, especially I appreciate you trying to say for an American living in Boston, what would you think of this? Is there anything else that you think that we don't grasp that you'd really like to drive home?
Um, I think a lot of people must wonder why we choose to live here, right? When I have an American passport, my children have American passports. My husband is Israeli. My father is an American who's living here. I have a lot of family members here who are Israeli. And this for us right now feels like home. This is a place where we have our jobs and our house and our friends and our neighbors and our community. And we feel like we want to see a better future for this region. And we feel that by being here, we are playing a part in that in some way. Not that we wish war. I don't think anyone wants war. I don't think anyone wants to see death or destruction. Absolutely, that's the last thing. But unfortunately, that is very much the language of this neighborhood. And it's something that, I think we started this podcast because we wanted people to understand what it feels like to be people living in Israel that weren't necessarily born here, right? To feel like this is very much our home, and we feel a piece of the story here, but at the same time that we hold a lot of complexity of, having spent, the last years before moving here in Brookline, working at Harvard, raising our children there, and kind of holding the understanding of what it feels like to be American and Israeli at the same time. And it's certainly complex.